The man in front right here is the overall winner of the Manufacturers Cup for all of North and South America, and I had the pleasure of racing him right after the balance of performance was changed a few weeks ago. Both of us starting in the back, what was going to be a casual race through traffic ended in an epic battle, and I want to show you how it played out. Rseat was a Group 3 race in Fuji that initially was dominated by the Ferrari, with the Citroën being my anti-meta car, but after the Bape was changed, many different cars became viable. Enter the Peugeot VGT and the Z4. While I had tried the Pug VGT that Symin was in, I was unable to drive it well, especially in the final sector as the car is all top speed but doesn't quite enjoy the corners. The Z4 was kind of below average before, but suddenly a bit above average, and without discussing it beforehand, we ended up in this race together without qualifying times, just trying to see what the recently updated cars could do. Starting in third was our favorite lawyer Paul, with our buddy Tinsley starting in 14th ahead of Symin, and I rounded out the bottom of the 16 all the way in the back. Even before the race started, I assumed I would be able to make some moves at the very least by the final sector, and even though I knew I wouldn't be able to drive the Pug, I knew Symin was different. You see, Symin was at a level where in 2024, at least in my head, I thought I could harass him on track and provide him with a solid battle, but by the official season this year, he became something different entirely. Winning the Manufacturers Cup outright with Lamborghini, he solidified himself as one of the all-time great GT7 drivers, and if anyone could tame the Pug VGT, it would be him. Seeing Tins was in the old GT500 NSX, I knew we were in for some funny business, and as I flew out of the first corner, I was pretty confident that I'd be able to make my way through the crowd. As soon as I thought I was going to be able to fly past, the rocket Symin was in started to really move, and he went for an inside pass on turn 2. So I decided to keep my distance and try to follow whichever car made it through quicker. While I never once doubted Symin's ability to pilot the VGT, I was definitely unsure how it could fare against the meta car. Expecting chaos, but not this early, we were both forced to check up and be extra careful. Diving on the outside to avoid whatever gave Carlos a 6-second penalty, I quickly realized I was far too careful and had lost a bit of ground. What I didn't realize at the time was my super wide line in the previous corner allowed me to take full advantage of the newfound acceleration of the Z4, while the other three I had been close to had all apparently sacrificed their exit speed. As I positioned myself on the inside, Symin was forced to brake a bit earlier due to the car in front of him not going deep enough into the hairpin. I'm not sure if Carlos was completely unaware that I was already next to him in the hairpin or if he was doing this on purpose, but he repeatedly hit me and nearly pushed me entirely off the track, but each subsequent contact seemed to throw his car more and more off balance. By the penultimate corner, I was luckily far enough in front of him and he stopped initiating contact, which gave me the chance to nail the all-important final corner. All I had to do was focus on a solid exit, and if I could, I'd have the benefit of the slipstream all the way down the incredibly long front straight. Even if Carlos was still in my slipstream, the Z4 was now powerful enough when in another car's slipstream that the Ferrari would have no hope of getting any overlap leading into turn 1, but none of that mattered because Carlos had to serve his 6-second penalty, which would effectively take him out of the race entirely. Looking in my rearview, my relief was short-lived because Symin was somehow able to stay within the magical 1-second range, giving him a little bit of slipstream, which would be enough to make the VGT even more dangerous in the worst place possible. As the Ferrari immediately ahead made a clumsy move on the other Ferrari, I was gifted yet another position and found myself in 9th place, but now I had to worry about the racecraft from the person directly in front of me. Nennekin not only completely missed the apex, he didn't even hesitate and definitely didn't give the position back, so I could only expect him to defend in the same way against me. He was also much slower through turn 2 than I expected and had bunched up the now probably angry Ferrari driver with Symin right behind me. Forced to defend on the inside from the scorned Ferrari, I was able to successfully fend him off and stay close to the clumsy Ferrari ahead, but that gave Symin the perfect chance to follow me through. At this point, I hadn't really considered what the outcome might be, but seeing my friend next to a stranger, I decided to move over and give him the slipstream leading to the next corner. I didn't quite consider what that might mean for the end of the race. As the Ferrari dove on the outside to maintain his position against Symin, who braked perfectly, my attention now turned to the previously clumsy Ferrari as I realized I was much faster through the complex section. Staying wide to give myself options, the Ferrari luckily gave Andy and the Hyundai plenty of space, and that gave me the perfect gap to slide into. Hustling my car next to the Ferrari, I knew if I could beat him through the next corner, I could lose him on the straight, but as Andy had to slow down to avoid going off track, I found myself sandwiched between the two. Thanks to the weird Gran Turismo collision physics, this slowed me down but slowed Nennekin down a lot, and that gave me the space to focus on my exit against the Hyundai. While I thought I was free and clear of the Ferrari, he dove towards the apex, completely ignoring the idea of exit speed, and luckily, my previous fears were unfounded as he gave me just enough space to avoid being spun out. I had worried that I would not be able to gain enough speed to T1 if I had moved out of Andy's slip this early, so I gave him a bump, hoping it would put enough space between us that it would be a 1 versus 1 rather than a free-for-all involving the Ferrari behind. As we braked into turn 1, Andy turned in slightly too early to leave me any room, but since I didn't have any overlap initially, the line wasn't mine and I was forced to go full brake pressure to avoid a collision. Fair enough, but it became clear Andy was not going to go down without a fight. As he defended into turn 2, despite me being too far behind him out in attack, I figured I could pull off some kind of crossover coming out of the corner and possibly pass him in the wide right-hand sweeper. Hoping to slot behind to not give him a clue of my next move, he suddenly braked hard mid-corner. I don't know if he wasn't sure how to take the corner or if he was trying to brake check me, but either way, it slowed me down enough to ruin my momentum and make it impossible to do anything leading into the next corner. Leading into the next hairpin, I knew I had to do something, as the overall pace we were going was much too slow and we were losing the pack ahead. Making it clear he was going to defend every single corner regardless of how much it slowed us down, I decided to set up a dummy line and move at the last second for a dive. Despite the fact that I went far too deep, Andy maintained his momentum around the outside and got a much better exit, maintaining his position. After sliding out just barely on the important left-hander, he lost just enough momentum for me to get right next to him on the right-hander, and just a dab of oversteer solidified my position in front of him finally. Taking a tight line to defend the next corner, I was able to get the power down and put just enough distance between us. As I went wide in the final corner, Andy cut it a little more narrow, which made me open up my line just in case. I'd rather have a bad exit than get spun. But luckily, I didn't have to worry about that, and while we both lost a bit of grip accelerating onto the straight, I was able to get just enough more to gain the upper hand. While I was uncertain what the Genesis would be able to do now with the new Bape, it became clear that it was not a winner in the performance lottery. He had slipstream from the very beginning of the straight, and despite that, the newly fantastic Z4 kept pulling on him the entire way down. It was in this moment that I realized I would have been able to pass him and be fully ahead into turn 1 if I had decided not to bump draft him on the previous lap, which means none of that battle would have happened. Lessons learned. As I was checking my rear view, I also noticed Symin had made his way past both the Ferraris, including the one that had pushed him off track, and we were once again separated by a single car. After having perfectly clean air in front for the rest of the lap, the Ferrari that was 2 full seconds ahead in Sector 2 was less than a half second ahead leading onto the straight, which meant I had full slipstream, and despite the fact that he did as well, the Z4 was now so powerful that it didn't stop me from getting all the way next to him leading into turn 1. This was now a game of chicken on the brakes. Hitting the middle pedal as late as I dared, I was set to fly straight past when I realized I had carried so much speed in the corner our friend Felmora was still on the apex. Full braking for a second stopped me from injuring our friend's bumper, but it gave Firecrusher enough time to get on the throttle and stay next to me. Luckily, our old pal Felmora stayed on the normal line, and the slipstream plus my Z4 acceleration put me all the way ahead of Firecrusher, who yielded by the time we got to the corner. After sticking with the ever-beautiful Felmora for the rest of the lap through no fault of his, the Z4 was simply too strong out of the final corner and I was able to zoom straight by. But without slipstream aiding me, and with an entire front straight of slipstream for Felmora, he certainly was not going to go down without a fight. One of the funny things about sim racing is when you have a reputation as a clean driver, it can work against you, and since I knew I could trust Felmora not to push me off track, I stayed on the outside hoping I could keep up more momentum and use the Z4 acceleration to maintain my position. After a perfectly clean turn 1, I was all the way ahead and could now work on trying to catch the 4th place driver who was a bit more than 3 seconds ahead. It wasn't until we pit on lap 9 that I caught the next 2 Ferraris, but I was now in a sticky situation. I was going to have to pass 2 drivers in the Metacar, and Symin had somehow managed to get himself past every other driver and was now within slipstream range in the car with the absolute fastest top speed in the class. Since Leshy had given himself the pit entrance penalty, he was going to quickly not be a factor whatsoever, but there was still an entire lap where those two could battle and push me back closer and closer to Symin. If they were to battle now, not only would they both slow down, but they would make it so I was at the mercy of their pace, neutralizing any advantage I had in Sector 3, putting Symin in the perfect place to pass me. Luck was once again on my side, however, as they had been out of sync in the last corner, allowing me to move in a position to pass Leshy before the hairpin. While that was good enough for now, I had to also trust that the guy in front was going to be fast enough for me to maintain distance to Symin behind. With any luck, if VR Man Cam slowed me down, Leshy would be able to slow Symin down, but if I wasn't able to go at my maximum pace, it potentially wouldn't matter at all. Already having to check up twice, not only was I not able to go at my own pace, but Leshy was still so close that I worried he might even try for a pass and slow me down even more. Symin was in the perfect position to sit back and wait for the straight. What had been nearly a full second before passing Leshy, the distance between Symin and I was less than a half second as he was directly behind Leshy now. Leshy decided to make one more move onto the final corner despite knowing he had to serve the penalty in mere feet, and that slowed me down even more. Luckily, through all of that, I still had slipstream on VR Man Cam, but with Symin now fully in my slipstream, my chance to lose Symin was now gone. This would mean the last 4 laps of the race were going to be an all-out war. As my Z4 gained speed on the Ferrari, I was in shock to see how much faster the Pug VGT was. This was going to be a 3-wide turn into T1, and I was the meat in a very dangerous sandwich. Braking later than usual, I would be able to block the Ferrari on the outside from turning in, while also giving me a wider arc to be able to maintain more momentum through the corner and hopefully maintain enough speed to stay ahead of Symin. As I maintained my position on the normal line, I knew my work was cut out for me. The Z4 would certainly be superior as soon as we got to Sector 3, and I had suspected it would be just as good if not a bit better through Sector 2, but was that going to be enough to fend him off in the entire front straight? This entire race, I had maintained a good distance to Symin by utilizing the Z4's unique handling and acceleration to get in front of cars and put people between us, but the last lap closed that gap entirely. While the Z4 might have actually been superior in Sector 2, it was certainly not superior enough in my hands, and I found myself immediately defending into the hairpin of Sector 3. As we both dove into the hairpin, I was blown away to see Symin inches from my car hugging the same line I was taking. Hustling it through the left-hander, the Z4's handling was perfect, but by forcing a battle at the beginning of this sector, Symin neutralized it enough that I wasn't going to be able to get far enough ahead by the straight. Staying right on my bumper through the last corner, I had only 2 corners to put some distance between us, but I could already tell it wasn't going to be enough. My only hope was that the Z4 would be just quick enough to keep me close so I could then try to turn the tables on him and attack on the next lap. As we head to the straight, I think we need to take a look at that action from a better camera angle. In my opinion, the hardest attack in sim racing is around the outside of the hairpin. Trusting the inside car to turn at the exact right time while staying close enough to maintain momentum is the ultimate test of control, and Symin did it perfectly there. If he were in any other car, he would have been fully ahead of me by this point. Back to the front straight. In just 2 corners, I was able to put nearly a half second between us, but as you saw before, that wouldn't matter much with the VGT. Moving all the way to the inside immediately, I was just going to wait and see exactly how long it would take for him to pass, and with any luck, I'd be able to dive into the corner and keep my position. For a moment, it looked like I was going to be ahead into the corner, but it was simply not the case. Symin braked and turned in just perfectly to give me space but take the corner decisively. Knowing I could stick with him until the next straight, I was not quite sure just how the Z4 was going to do in the slipstream with the Pug. The VGT was so incredibly fast that I worried I would be left in the dust even if I had slipstreamed down the entirety of the front straight. For a moment, I had thought I might be able to stay close enough to mount an attack leading into the 3rd sector, in which case I could potentially pass and we could play this same game for the last few laps. I knew if I could get ahead in the 3rd sector, I could possibly stay ahead just long enough to cross the finish line. It wouldn't matter if he got ahead into turn 1 every single lap as long as I could pull off the same thing we did on the last lap. But as we moved towards that final sector, it was clear I was not going to be close enough to do anything at all. It seemed at this point that I had very much underestimated the car, Symin's abilities, or most likely, a combination of the two. I was now on plan C. After failing to keep him away from my slipstream for long enough, and failing to get ahead leading into the final sector, my only hope was that I could stick to his bumper and get a perfect exit out of the final corner, so the momentum plus the slipstream could possibly get me ahead into next lap's turn 1. Leading into the final corner, I needed to be just far enough behind that I could gain momentum in his slipstream long enough that if I could indeed get past him, then the drag wouldn't slow me down as his greased wedge of a car cut straight through the air. Now was the moment of truth. If the Z4 was fast enough in slipstream, then our battle would continue, but if not, the race was already over. As we approached the start-finish line, to my surprise, I was actually going faster than the insane VGT. Unfortunately, just as I had worried, the instant I got up next to him, the drag was too much, and I was forced to slot in behind him once again. This was, however, just enough proof that I needed to know I could attack, but I was going to have to be a lot more clever. On the next lap, I decided to try to stay back just a little bit more, hoping that the timing of me sliding up next to him would be closer to the braking zone and I'd be able to go for a pass. This time, with 3/10 between us, it felt perfect, but as we moved down the straight, I was realizing something was a bit off. Either this was too far, my exit wasn't as good as before, or perhaps both, but where 2/10 was good enough last time, this 3/10 proved too much distance to fully utilize his slipstream. We were now on the 14th of 15 laps, and I had only one more chance to do absolutely anything. While I had not given up hope, I knew I would need a miracle to pull off any kind of move whatsoever, and I thought this was my miracle. As he slipped on the exit curb, I moved into position, but the VGT power was too much even in this situation. Unable to get any real overlap and in the slower position, Symin took his rightful place ahead of me once again. I had only one more chance to get ahead in the next lap, and I decided I had to do everything I could possibly think of. Diving up the inside, Symin gave me space and was able to stick to his bumper with a good exit. Since I couldn't time the slipstream pass well enough and pushing him would certainly result in him staying fully in front of me leading into turn 1, I had an idea. By feathering the throttle to stay close, I could then time my full throttle to hopefully get me in a position to move next to him right into turn 1. As we approached the corner, I moved out of his slipstream and I wasn't quite in position. I braked late, and even though I had no real overlap, Symin gave me the full space. Realizing I was going to hit him if I didn't slow down more, I braked heavily and it looks like we scraped just a bit, but we both maintained our lines and momentum. This time on the outside for turn 2, I was hoping I could stay there until the corner, but it wasn't quite enough. Braking a bit early, I was hoping I could utilize Symin's pinched line going into the corner to get around the outside of the next corner, but again, not quite enough. As I realized how bad my tire wear was, I could only hope his was as well, and so I held onto the hope the discrepancy in ability through Sector 3 might finally give me an advantage. Since I had deliberately tried to stay behind him going into the final corner the previous few laps, I had realized that I hadn't tried to be aggressive in those corners. At this point, I knew I couldn't attack into the beginning of the final sector, but since I had deliberately stayed behind him going into the front straight the past few laps, I realized that I might have an opportunity to get myself ahead before the final corner, and with any luck, I could get a good enough exit to carry me to the finish line first. Gently guiding the nearly dead tires over the various slippery bumps and undulations of the last few corners, I felt myself getting closer and closer and knew what I had to do to attack. Out of this left-hander, I would floor it straight up the inside and cut a tight arc through the final corner. I could rotate this Z4 quickly, and with the right throttle control, I could put the power down and fly out onto the straight. Not only that, but my presence on the exit could possibly change Symin's line enough that it could delay his throttle application, and with any luck, it would be just enough to finish ahead. As soon as the drag race to the finish had started, it was all over. Funnily enough, Symin had mentioned a couple days earlier how when people tried to dive up the inside, he would just take the wide arc, carry more momentum, and fly past. And even though I knew that was the most likely outcome, I was hoping the Z4 had enough acceleration that I could stay ahead long enough. With both of us in really wild cars that couldn't really hold a candle to the meta cars, we ended up having a beautiful battle that carried him to the podium and me to only one position behind after we had started in 14th and 15th. Both of us had finished 12 positions ahead of where we started, and I dare suggest I am not only speaking for myself when I say that our bond grew quite a bit over those 15 laps. It was an honor and a pleasure to race against the champ, and I hope one day I can give him the same kind of battle in the official season. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll be finishing off with a look at my current members who I absolutely adore. Thank you.